Hello there friends, my name is Gerd and welcome to video. Today, we're going to be doing a discussion on what are the best and worst aspects of every Fire Emblem game. Every single one of them, unless I forget one. Starting off, we have the first game in the series, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. The best thing about this game is the fact that, honestly, since it's an NES game and they managed to fit a lot of interesting and good ideas into it, and it was enough to start an entire franchise. I know it seems a little cheap just giving it credit for being the first one, but it really deserves all the credit in the world for being the first one, and on such primitive hardware. The worst aspect of this, however, is the fact that it is an NES game. Inventory management in this game absolutely sucks. Conveying of information absolutely sucks, and you basically need to have a little guide to look up the weapon stats and whatnot. It doesn't feel great to play, but it's still a relatively good experience despite that. Next up, we have Fire Emblem Gaiden, the second game in this series. The best aspect of this game is, despite the fact that it's only the second game in the series, they're already experimenting quite a bit with the formula here. They introduced a lot of interesting and unique mechanics that pretty much all of them were good ideas, and I really can't praise the spirit of experimentation enough. Unfortunately, the worst aspect of it is one specific thing. The fact that healing does not give you experience, combined with the fact that Nosferatu has a 50% accuracy. This makes training Silk and Jenny one of the most unpleasant experiences you could possibly have, and quite frankly, it's not fun at all. Would not recommend. Next up, we have Mystery of the Emblem, the one that has Book 1 and Book 2. So it's 2 games in 1. That's pretty cool. I'm going to talk more broadly about it instead of saying the best thing about Book 1 and Book 2. I think the best thing about this game is dragons in general, both ones that you control and the ones that the enemies control. The fact that your dragons are controlled entirely by, you use a dragon stone and they turn into a big dragon for a couple of turns, as opposed to just treating it as your weapon like other games in the series do, is pretty awesome. And then there's also the enemy dragons, which are big lumbering behemoths with 0 speed but piercing attacks. So playing around them is just consistently a pretty interesting experience, because you have to plan around the fact that you're probably going to be taking damage from them, and they're genuinely pretty threatening. The worst aspect of this game, however, is the fact that Marth is the only one who can visit villages. There are some maps in this game, particularly in Book 2, that are almost completely ruined by this fact. You know the one I'm talking about. Next up, we have the first, not the first SNES game, the first Yggdrasil game, Genealogy of the Holy War. This is known as the one with the really big maps. So the best aspect of this game is, I'm going to say just a single chapter of it. The final chapter of this game is amazing. All of the story beats are coming to a very satisfying climax. There's a lot of mechanically interesting things happening on the map, and a lot of room for you to mess around with everything that you've built up to that point, combined with one of the best map themes in the series. I can't say enough good stuff about the final map of this game. The worst aspect of it is perhaps a symptom of the fact that the maps are very big, but oftentimes a lot of your units don't have stuff to do, particularly units who are on foot. This leads to a weird setup where, outside of your obvious carries, almost every unit's XP curve is entirely tied to their ability to clear the arena. Granted, you could just not care, but if you're playing ranked, experience is one of the things. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time in the arena, and because hit rates in the arena can sometimes be a little bit iffy, and you absolutely have to be able to kill a certain enemy, you'll probably spend a lot of time resetting just to be able to make sure you get that one kill you need to either hit a level threshold or just get through it at all. So that really slows the game down drastically. Next up in this series, we have Thracia 776, and I do not have a copy of it. The best aspect of this game is that the emergent gameplay features of it are just off the charts. It constantly feels like a dynamic experience, like no matter how you're playing it, and whether this be through the capture mechanics or the fact that movement level ups are a thing, like, every playthrough will probably feel fresh. The worst aspect of it, however, is this could be a matter of preference, but I feel like the design philosophy of the game starts gradually shifting before taking a hard left turn towards the end game, where it effectively devolves into being a series of staff puzzles. Some people may find that interesting, but I feel like the game generally doesn't do a very good job of ramping you up to that being the case, and then all of a sudden you have a couple of maps that are basically just warp skip it, otherwise you're not going to have a good time. Like, I can't imagine actually playing the Reinhardt map seriously, because you're just going to spend like 7 turns just undoing status stabs, and then you get to the other side and have to deal with like a whole bunch of ballistas and everything, and it's like, I don't understand why you'd want to actually play that. Maybe that's a hot take, maybe not. I don't know. Next up, we have Binding Blade, or Sword of Seals if you want to call it by its slave name. This is obviously a bootleg copy. The best aspect of this game is that it has Arcadia in it. Yes, I'm serious. I'm the guy who made the 25-minute video talking about why Arcadia is so awesome. Linked below, probably, if I remember. The worst aspect of this game is the fact that a lot of the Gaiden maps in it, and there are an above average amount of them, kinda suck. Like, they all seem to have some sort of like weird way of manufacturing tedium into it, whether it be like the disappearing floors or all of the lava tiles in the one map, or all the poison clouds and stuff. Most of them are just not a good time, despite the fact there's so many of them. Unfortunate, but you know, you can live with it. Next up, we have Blazing Blade. Those of you with the keen eye will notice that this cartridge is also a bootleg. The best aspect of this game is the 3 protagonists. All 3 of them are very likable, to the point where I think they really just carry the experience of like you wanting to play this game. It's there's a reason why people remember this game so fondly, and the 3 lords are definitely a big part of it. The worst aspect of this game is the Kashuna maps, particularly how you have to unlock some of them. Fighting Kashuna in general is just like weirdly obnoxious because it's just a high defense enemy that's really evasive. So, and you basically just have to kill him instantly, otherwise you fail and have to restart the map. But the real dumb one is the fact that one of them you have to unlock by getting Nil to a certain level in Lin mode, which boils down to you just sitting there and spamming dance for like 30 turns. It's really stupid, and I don't know how they expected anyone to figure that out. Next up is Sacred Stones. This cartridge is real. The best aspect of this game is the antagonist. Leon is super compelling, super sympathetic, and the fact that you get to see his like intense, close relationship with both of the protagonists just really ties it all together. Like, honestly, he's one of the series like writing high points as far as I'm concerned. Worst aspect of this game is it's a little bit too easy, combined with the fact that it's already easy and you have Seth, who is one of the best units in this series. Partially because he's in this game, but honestly, you can throw Seth into any of the other GBA games and he would be absolutely amazing. It feels like the game was not like totally balanced around him existing, but they put him in anyway. Next up, we have the Tellius games. Path of Radiance. I do not have an actual case for this, because I bought it like this. The best aspect of this game is bonus experience. I think it's a really fun way to encourage interesting side objectives while giving you the freedom to either be hyper-optimal and funnel all the experience into a couple of good units, or let you play with your favorites. Like, Rolf isn't a good unit at all, but But if you really wanted to use him, you can just carry him to usable with base experience, and it'll work out. Good stuff. The worst aspect of this game is probably that it's too slow. This becomes more obvious the more stuff is on a map. So this peaks at Clash, which is a pretty obnoxious map already. When you have the game moving slowly and all of the enemies with like ranged weapons and Kanto, and you're probably not one-rounding them, it's going to be weirdly tedious. But, oh well. It's not as slow as Radiant Dawn though. But the speed is not my worst aspect of Radiant Dawn. Speaking of Radiant Dawn. So, the best aspect of this game is it's really ambitious. Potentially for better or worse. But the split perspectives, constantly changing approach to map design, and refining of all the mechanics that existed in Path of Radiance is all really admirable. And I think this boiled down to its ambition was mostly met, because the sense of scale and scope of the narrative in this game is impressive. All that boils down to ambitious. I feel like I said multiple things here, but I think you get what I'm saying. The worst aspect of Radiant Dawn is by far the Part 4 route maps. They are insufferably long and have way too many reinforcements in them that spawn in ways that don't do anything to actually threaten you, but just waste your time. The way I look at it is, if the challenge of the map is you should have beaten it faster, otherwise to avoid fighting these reinforcements, that just gives you a situation where the getting good process isn't even fun. Because realistically, you would have spent like, what, over an hour getting to as far in the map as you were. So what are you supposed to do? Restart the map and waste just as much time doing it faster? I don't think that's a very good approach, and honestly, these maps are freaking atrocious. Almost ruined the game entirely for me, if it weren't for the fact that I liked the endgame a lot. Alright, so we're going to move on to the DS games now. They're both remakes of the Marth games. Shadow Dragon. I do not have a case for this. The best aspect of this game is it doesn't seem to care. And I mean that in a good way. So it'll let you go absolutely nuts with all of the reclassing. Like, oh, let's just forge the Wing Spear up to being absurdly powerful so you can just one-shot every boss with it. Let's give you 2 ballisticians and someone who could also transform into it, and an item you can pass around to make their ballista bolts have infinite ammo. Let's give you, like, effectively infinite uses of the Warp Staff. This game is nuts in ways that I can absolutely appreciate. The worst aspect of this game is probably the aesthetic. Let's be real, this game looks ugly as sin. I think the character portraits are fine, they have a nice rustic aspect to it, but every other part of it just is gouging your eyes out if you try to look at it. The maps are like very drab looking. I get what they were going for, but it doesn't like feel organic at all. It feels like way too dark in a way that's not fun to look at. All of the on-map sprites look awful. They do the bare minimum of conveying what you're actually looking at, but with all the gross, thick outlines on them, they just look stupid and like they don't belong in the environment at all. All of the battle sprites, or battle 3D models, whatever, pseudo 3D models, they look awful as well. Like they have no personality to them whatsoever. There's a reason people don't like this game that much, and I think the aesthetic is a large part of it. Next up is New Mystery of the Emblem. I don't have a copy of this because it's a Japanese-only one. The best aspect of New Mystery is that it is extremely tightly designed. You have to admire the commitment they had to wanting the player to be as good as possible at it, as well as making you make full use of the mechanics and understand everything. It's an intense experience that I can really appreciate. However, the worst thing about New Mystery is that it is well designed to a fault. While the gameplay is undeniably very good, it comes at the expense of literally everything else that makes Fire Emblem appealing. The series had always been built around the fact that you were getting immersed in scenarios and the characters through the gameplay. When you hyper-fixate on the gameplay and difficulty so much, you reach the point where you just look at every single character as this random blob of stats that has to work around these other random blobs of stats, and it's easy to break your immersion very quickly. For example, when I last played the game, I was at the Ice Dragon Castle where you get Tiki, and the amount of resetting I did just because oops, I was off by one number, or oh no, one of the enemies randomized with one more point of speed than I needed them to, so this plan falls apart, is really annoying. You kind of just lose it after resetting so many times. So I find the getting good process to be really detached from the stuff I like about this series. Oh well. Alright, moving on. DS games. The first one, the one that quote-unquote saved the franchise, Fire Emblem Awakening. The best thing in this game is the scene where Chrom and Lucina unite. This scene has arguably more heart in it than most other scenes in the entire series combined. That scene is so good. The line in it, which I won't even quote, is touching. That scene is beautiful. I can't say enough good things about it. The worst aspect of Awakening is the map design feels kind of sloppy at times. Whether it be for weird enemy triggers where you'll trigger way too much of the map at once. Like when I played the Sayori map, I recall I go and rescue her, and then every single enemy on the map just charging at me. So it leaves you with no choice but to play it in weird juggernaut-y ways. But the worst offender of the map design being sloppy is the tree map. Specifically the ambush spawns. You know the ones I'm talking about. The people have always complained about ambush spawns, and I get it. One of the things that could alleviate that is actually signposting it well. And you start playing that map and you think, oh, great, he announced it. You know where you're expecting them to come from, and then enemies spawn there. And then a bunch of flying enemies spawn from the side of the maps, and this is a narrow map, so effectively any mildly defenseless unit you had existing within their zip code just gets deleted. It's not fun, and I don't know, it feels untested at times with stuff like that. Alright, next up is Fates. I'm going to talk about every game in Fates individually. So first off is Conquest, because that's the one that's physically in my hands right now. The best aspect of it is, you expect me to say Chapter 10, and Chapter 10 is very good. But I think I can more broadly say the fact that Conquest is the one game in the series that fully embraces the, fun RPG character building stuff, as well as going hard as it possibly could with, weird strategy stuff. The series has always kind of drifted back and forth between what it's focusing on of those two aspects, but Conquest proves that it can dig equally as deep into both of them and still be a ridiculously solid experience. The worst aspect of Conquest is, I'll pick a specific map, the Kitsune Forest map. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you are fighting exclusively the same enemy throughout the entire map, which is, the gimmick is not as interesting as some of the other gimmicks on the map. So basically it's just Juggernaut a couple at a time and just pay attention to how they're moving, and it doesn't feel that much different. But the aspect that annoys me the most is it has a lot of forest tiles in it, but visually it's often hard to look at that map and properly identify which tile is a forest tile and which one is just looks like it has a couple of leaves on it. So, too many forest tiles that are hard to see, enemies that are already dodgy sitting on those forest tiles, and it's just an annoying experience in a game that's otherwise ridiculously solid. Next up is Birthright. I'll be completely honest, the best thing about Birthright is that it is a thoroughly inoffensive game for the most part that has Fate's really good core gameplay attached to it. Birthright is not one of my favorites at all, but I can at least enjoy playing it. And the worst aspect of it is probably what I just said, the fact that I don't have much interesting to say about it. But if I were to pick one specific thing, I feel like some of the route maps in the game, which is all of them, I guess, have a bad habit of like spawning weirdly unthreatening enemies and making you just waste your time killing them. It's not nearly as egregious as like Radiant Dawn's implementation of that, but it's weirdly slow for no reason at times. And then there's Revelation, a lot of people's least favorite game in the series, and I kind of understand why. The worst part, I'll say the worst part first. The worst part about Revelation is the map gimmicks are not fun. Now, I've seen people say this as, Revelation is bad because it's gimmicky. No, that's not fair to say. Conquest is extremely gimmicky with most of its maps, but all the gimmicks are good. The gimmicks in Revelation are on average pretty bad. Bad to the point where it's like obnoxiously tedious for no reason, whether it be the snow shoveling map, the multiple maps where you have to sit there and wait for a platform to be able to move. I honestly don't know what the hell they were thinking with the way they made most of those maps. The best aspect, however, is if you liked Fates for the child making and all of the character building stuff, if you treat Revelation as a sandbox to go absolutely nuts with that, you're gonna have a pretty good time with it, honestly. And I like the fact that there's an experience in even like the weaker game in the series that people can get behind. All right, so what's next? I think Warriors 1 came out next. Yeah, let's talk about Warriors 1. So Fire Emblem Warriors 1. The best aspect of this is easily the history mode, where you play through scenarios from older games in the series, but you do it through like a series of like Warriors maps and stuff. It's a really engaging way to interact with the Warriors gameplay, and really makes you dig in and appreciate old things in the series. It's pretty cool. Like the Celica map, where you have to do Jetta's weird, like, every 4 attacks type of thing to fight it properly. That's super cool, doing that in this kind of game. The worst aspect of this is easily the story in general. Granted, this is dumb crossover fluff, but they didn't even do anything with that. I mean, the main protagonist, Rowan, is just obnoxious and not very likable. Leanne, whatever her name is, she's just kind of nothing. The main antagonist is blah as can be. And then, for some reason, they spend an excessive amount of time in this game just retreading Fates, but worse. I don't know why. This isn't a game I revisit a lot. But if I were to revisit, I would go for the history mode and skip the main story entirely. Alright, next up, we have Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. This is the remake of Gaiden, and it is my personal favorite game in the series. The best part about this game is the game feel is out of this world. The presentation helps a lot, and you were probably expecting me to say that's the best part about this game. But it feels really solid. In a way that's distinctly grounded and non-video gamey, that's very easy to get immersed in. All the small-scale conflicts, units and fields just duking it out. or assaulting fortresses and very specific things that are how the maps are set up. This game is a good time for me every single time I play it, and I like it more and more every time. Like, I love the story, but on my current playthrough, I've been skipping the story just to enjoy the gameplay, and it's still a great experience. The worst part about this game, I was tempted to say pass, and you probably thought I was going to say the maps, but no, you're wrong. I genuinely love almost every map in this game. But the worst weird nitpicky thing I will say is the fact that Priestess gets super gimped movement in sand. It's a mage class, and I guess they treat it like a sword class and give it only one move instead, which feels weirdly punishing when you go out of your way to like get May to Priestess before you even get to Act 3, and then you're punished by her movement sucks. It's a weird feeling, and I'm kind of annoyed with that. That's a personal pet peeve for my current playthrough. Alright, next up, we have Three Houses. I have the fancy special edition for this one, too. The best part about this game is definitely battalions. This is the new mechanic for the game, and I think they did a pretty good job with it. Granted, there is a lot of, like, absolutely busted ones, namely Stride. But I think it's really interesting that this game has a very strong sense of, like, crowd control going on, which is not something that this series really has in general. So you'll have a large group of enemies. In other games, you would have to, strategically find a way to only deal with a couple of them at a time, or put your dumb juggernaut in the way and then they hope they all die. But in this game, you have a much more interesting tool for dealing with them. I found battalions fun on hard and normal, and the DLC. You make a lot of use of them, and I grew to appreciate them more and more the more I played this game, and I put a lot of time into this game. The worst part about Three Houses is probably half the reason why I put a lot of time into this game. I'm not going to say the monastery specifically, because I do like what the monastery contributes to the pacing of this game. However, I do think there were a lot of missed opportunities for how you could optimize the monastery and just make it a much smoother experience, especially for the people who don't care about it as much as I do. For example, you spend a lot of time feeding the students, and every single time you watch them have their little bit of dialogue. Granted, that's nice to see, especially because you can be hunting for exclusive dialogue comparing two specific units together. But you're telling me that they didn't think that you might want to just say, okay, let's feed this group, this group, this group, and this group, and then just do it all in one button press? The game would be a lot faster if you were able to optimize just little things like that. Alright, next up we have, I guess Three Hopes came out next, so I'll talk about that. Three Hopes, this is the Warriors spin-off side qual, alternate. I don't know what the term for what this is related to Three Houses is. Three Houses Warriors spin-off, alternate timeline thing. The best aspect of this game to me is the fact that the build process for any character is extremely transparent. I really like the fact that you can just look at the class change diagram for every character, highlight it, and see, okay, if I go to this, I'm going to learn this. So it gives you a lot of freedom to plan out all of your stuff, even in a completely blind playthrough. So I never understood in other games like Fates and Three Houses, where you get to a class and then not know what you're actually getting out of it, and then you, I don't know, like reach level 5 or something, and then, oops, you didn't learn something useful, guess you made a bad call. Granted, this could be solved by looking it up, but I'm a pretty strong advocate for designing games in ways that don't require you to look it up, and the classes in this are a great way to do that. The worst part about this game is Shez's storyline is, like, weirdly awkward. I don't think it fits into the narrative at all. Like, yeah, it's a driving force behind a lot of it, but you eventually get so invested into like the real conflict of the game that when you randomly take a detour into the Shez and Arval stuff, it just kind of ends and then feels like he's saying nothing about it. It's weird and weirdly unsatisfying. All right, I guess we're gonna talk about Engage now. Engage, the most recent game in the series. The best aspect of it is probably just like Three Houses, the new exclusive to this game mechanic, the emblem rings. I think this is a very interesting take on, it's effectively sort of what battalions were, but like way more wild and wacky. This gives you a lot of freedom to do a lot of stuff, and the game is very tightly designed around expecting you to use them as much as possible. And being encouraged to use game mechanics is always a good thing to me as far as like design goes. I can't say enough good things about the emblem rings. The worst aspect of this game is, I bet you expect me to say the story. And to be fair, the story is not great, but I never found it to be so bad to the point where it's like absolutely and completely ruining the experience like some people have said. The worst thing to me is, I'll point out a specific map. The Sea Doll map. I think from a game design perspective, it's kind of objectively awful. So multiple new mechanics are being introduced in that map. Dancing, and Corrin. Corrin is a very flexible emblem, but you can't do much with it when it's also on your dancer. So it doesn't give you the space to actually play around with the new mechanics that you've learned. It's very like cluttered in its design space. And this is on top of the fact that the map in general is kinda one of the more boring ones in the game by virtue of being progressed through hallway, which is a type of map a lot of people usually don't like in these games anyway. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. All right, so what's left? I guess we can talk about heroes. Oh God. Okay, so heroes, the best aspect of it is there's lots of good art in it. I stopped playing Heroes a while ago, but I'm still checking in constantly to see what the new art is for every character. The worst aspect of it is the power creep and just general design philosophy of the game is completely impenetrable at this point, that I can't imagine why anyone still wants to play it. Every time I see one of the new banner reveal trailers and it describes a unit as being, or describes a weapon, where the only way they design stuff now will be take 5 or 6 generically useful skills, lock them behind some extremely easy to fulfill conditions, like if enemy is attacking you, or if you're attacking an enemy is at 25% or more HP. Like, what? That's basically just say always on. Throw that all into a blender, bam, that's your weapon skill. Oh, and it's a well-bait unit. We gotta give them basically the same type of design for their exclusive skill. So it gets to the point where you can't reasonably look at any scenario and be able to tell whether or not you're able to actually win it or not. You effectively need to have a spreadsheet of all the abilities that are on and then cross-reference it to be able to tell whether or not you're actually going to kill something. Granted, you can trial and error it, but that's annoying and I don't like it. Hero stopped being fun for me a long time ago. And I guess oh wait, there's BSFE. I don't know anything about that game, to be honest. So I guess the best part about it is the fact that it is a weird novelty in the series, and the worst part about it is that I have not played it. Alright friends, thanks for watching. Contribute to some discussion down in the comments below. What are some of the best and worst things that you think are noteworthy throughout this series? Alright. Subscribe, and maybe I'll review Marth Teaches Typing. Peace out.